welcome to Things Are Getting Strange, the X-Files We Watch podcast. I'm Nick.
And I'm Kim.
And I don't have any news.
No, I used my friends on our social media for a very specific purpose this week, but we'll get into that when we talk about Ascension later.
You're all getting up on me.
Quite.
But otherwise, I don't think there's anything much of interest at the moment.
No, I've got no gossip.
I keep seeing mentions of X-Files Alberquerque, but that basically seems to be it's rumbling along in the background somewhere and no one knows anything further than that.
No, there doesn't seem to be any indication of when it's coming out or what it involves yet.
Or if it's ever going to come out. I mean, it feels an odd concept still, though, a cartoon X-Files.
I think it sounds like the perfect concept. Think of all the things you could do that you couldn't budget for in live action.
I suppose so. You have reminded me. So, I suppose one thing we're going to do later on, I think it's when we get to season 4 of the X-Files, we're going to start putting Millennium into sequence with everything else. And eventually we'll get to the Lone Gunman as well. Millennium is a bit more tenuous given there's like one crossover point in the entire thing. But we're going to try and... It's part of the universe, as far as I understand it. And we're going to get into that. Lone Gunman's a bit more obvious. But after that, we've got an open book, and we could do all kinds of things. So Dark Skies feels like the obvious one, because Kim's never seen Dark Skies, and I have. And I can't wait to see her reactions when she sees Dark Skies.
Conspiracy Corner's going to have a different purpose, I feel.
Yeah, good luck with that one. Actually, no. Dark Skies doesn't have an incoherent conspiracy. It's just odd. But you've reminded me there, though, that we do, of course, have Strange.
Oh, please let me do some episodes about Strange one day.
And for anyone who hasn't seen Strange, things you can look forward to include haunted skirting boards. This is not a joke.
Oh, not to mention possessed breast implants.
Yes, that too. And the non-conclusion of the ending and the fact that the actual final story beats were on a website or something odd like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, it only ran for 6 episodes ultimately and then got axed.
I mean, the big thing is they've got Ian Richardson was basically the villain.
Yes, he played Cannon Black.
And I can't remember, the guy from Coupling was the hero, Mr. Strange or whatever his name was.
Mm. He was a former priest.
Yes. And it's, yeah, well, if we get to all the X-Files and Millennium and Lone Gunman and possibly Dark Skies, unless people want to see that before we do Dark Skies, because it'd be quite a short one before another whole season.
Yeah, it's not something we need to think about for now, at least. We've got plenty of X-Files to go, and you might be sick of the sound of us by then.
That's true. Please don't be. I mean, some people like us. But anyway, I suppose we should get on to this week's 2 episodes, which is our first X-Files 2-parter. So first up, we've got Duane Barry, which was directed and written by Chris Carter, and first broadcast on the 14th of October 1994. Guest stars include Steve Railsback, who played Duane Barry. He also was in Barbed Wire, where he played Colonel Victor Prizer. I can safely say I do not remember that, but who remembers Barbed Wire, really?
I do.
But we also have Frank C. Turner as Dr. Hackey, who this guy's got a great track record. Okay?
Go on.
So, he was Crazy Carl in Sonic the Hedgehog. He was Prison Major Number 2 in Warcraft. He was Sam Fisher in Alone in the Dark, another one from Alone in the Dark.
Of course he is. Yeah.
Arthur Montana Sims in Dead Like Me, the other Brian Fuller series. Mm. He was the storekeeper in Kingdom Hospital, which keeps coming back somehow. He was previously in the X-Files in Tombs as one of the other doctors at the trial. And for the one that I think we've seen him in the most and never realised, he is Al Marsh in the TV version of It. Beverly Marsh's father.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think Alone in the Dark was where I remembered him from.
Well, more than likely. Now, I always remember him as Prison Major Number 2 in Warcraft. Lastly, we have Carol Christine Hilaria Pounder, or CCH Pounder as she's credited as, who played Lucy Kasdan. She was in Face Off as Hollis Miller. She's in both Avatars as Moat. She's Amanda Waller, at least the voice actress for it, in various Batman projects, video game and cartoon. Mm-hmm. She was in Godzilla King of the Monsters as Sinister Williams. She was in Gargoyles as Desdemona and Coldfire.
She's one of the main antagonists.
Okay. She'll have a recurring role in Millennium as Dr. Cheryl Andrews. And, especially for you, Skylanders, trap team and imaginators as Golden Queen.
Ah, yep, I remember the Golden Queen. I'm so sad.
Oh, come on, Skylanders at least gave us Richard Horvitz. There's Chaos.
Chaos.
Okay, so Duane Barry. After an alien abduction experience, Duane Barry has become a violent patient in a mental institution. He refuses to take his medication and insists they are coming back for him. Duane Barry attacks a guard and takes his gun, forcing his psychiatrist, Dr. Hackey, to come with him as a trade to them. Duane Barry cannot remember the site of his original abduction, and goes to a travel agency and takes more hostages. Mulder and Krycek are ordered to help out by Agent Lucy Kasdan because of Mulder's interest in abductions. Mulder calls Duane Barry, who rapidly recognizes the hostage negotiation script Mulder is using, and remarks on this. This leads Mulder to realize that Duane Barry is a former FBI agent. Mulder contacts Scully to get more information about Duane Barry's medical history, particularly as it pertains to his abduction. A power outage occurs and a bright light panics Duane Barry, who ends up shooting one of the hostages. This allows Mulder and a paramedic inside the travel bureau. Mulder is told to lure Duane Barry near the door for the snipers to attack him. Mulder talks to Duane Barry about his abduction experience and the experimentation and implants in various parts of his body. Scully arrives and reveals that Duane Barry has frontal cortex damage, similar to a historical account. Therefore, Duane Barry might be a pathological liar. Mulder convinces Duane Barry to release the other hostages, except for Hackey, and asks if Duane Barry lied at any point in their conversation. This angers Duane Barry, and Mulder convinces him to approach the bureau door to lock it. Duane Barry is then shot by a sniper. Lucy Kasdan reveals the next day that Duane Barry has implants where he indicated and impossible holes in his teeth. Mulder gives Scully an implant for analysis. Upon investigation, they find an apparent microscopic barcode engraved into it. Scully scans the implant at the supermarket and causes the machine to malfunction. At home, Scully relays her findings to Mulder via Anne's phone and indicates it feels as if Duane Barry has been catalogued somehow. Duane Barry then breaks into her home and kidnaps her.
Before you get into it, should I talk about that historical account? The historical account that Scully mentions when talking about Duane Barry's injuries is called the American Crowbar case. It was in the 1840s. It pertained to a man called Phineas Gage, who was a worker on the railroad, who in a kind of freak blasting accident had what's called a tamping rod, which is a large javelin-like piece of metal fired through his skull. So it kind of went up vertically under his jaw, broke his cheekbone, knocked out a tooth, stole the vision from his left eye, and exited the skull from the top, taking out a chunk of his frontal lobe. So it basically lobotomized him. But it's kind of a historical point. Phineas Gage himself survived these injuries miraculously and became a celebrity. He was toured around, showcasing what happened to him and his miraculous survival. But the interesting thing about the case was its insight that it gave doctors into essentially the function of the brain and how it controls things like memory and personality. So it should be noted that what Scully says isn't actually what happened. There's no indication that it did turn Gage into a psychopath or a pathological liar or anything like that. The reports of the changes to Gage's personality were only actually released after Gage's death, so it's questionable about how true they were or if they were just kind of kept secret so as not to upset his family while he was still alive. But it's the idea of he lost a degree of intelligence. He used to be an incredibly sharp man, but was substantially less so after his incident. And also, he kind of lost the ability to regulate, I think, what they called animalistic urges in the doctor's report. So he became kind of more prone to acting on impulse and therefore had to be watched like a hawk at all times, essentially, just so he didn't do anything inappropriate in public or anything like that. The other interesting note I read about this episode was the thing about having his teeth drilled by aliens. Actually did come from an account from somebody Chris Carter knew who claimed to be an abductee, who claimed that they drilled his teeth and when he'd gone to his dentist, they hadn't been able to identify how his teeth had got these holes in them.
Okay, that's very curious. I mean, admittedly, I do remember my reaction and the reaction of a friend's dad at the time to this was, but they're already using lasers in dentistry.
True.
Which admittedly isn't quite what they were going for, but I only realised this time around how deliberately ambiguous the X-Files is at every point. Because as much as you're showing like the abduction at the start and the medical testing that they go through, Duane Barry and Scully, there's a really good chance that Scully's stuff is all Mulder's imagination, and Duane Barry's is his fantasies concocted because of his brain damage.
Mm.
But again, though, we do have the physical confirmation from Lucy Kasdan that he really does have holes in his teeth that can be done without damaging or chipping the teeth. So...
just casting doubt, but based on what we know of the X-Files so far, it's what's to say it's aliens and what's to say it's Men in Black.
Well, yeah. I mean, we haven't actually had... Well, no, we've had proper Men in Black only one time so far.
But I think it's Duane Barry himself, when he keeps changing his story, mentions that there are men in suits watching him as well as the aliens.
That's one of the bits where it's sort of, Mulder, you're going to have to start being a bit more sceptical of this man who said, I was abducted from my bedroom by aliens. Okay, we've heard that before. Sometimes the government are in the room. It's like, did the aliens call the government to say, hey, we're going to abduct that dude, come watch? And they're just lurking there in the doorway.
I think it helps both ways is, one, it's the confusion of we don't legitimately know if it's aliens or the government doing these things at this stage. But twofold, it shows that Barry's story is changing, so therefore we can't trust what he says.
Indeed. I mean, I think we'll get into this a bit more in Ascension in a bit, but yeah, there is that. The other bit, though, is we've got that little bit of ambiguity, because the abduction at the start is really creepy and everything, and we get an external shot of the house lit up like a Christmas tree. No one in the world apparently notices this, that there's an alien ship hovering over Duane Barry's house while his dog barks at them.
We've discussed the cone of silence before.
We have discussed the cone of silence, that's true. But not the cone of blindness. That's got to be a new one, hasn't it?
That's the upgraded version.
Okay. But this was in the 80s. I suppose Mulder was 70s. Yeah, okay. Samantha was of the 70s, so they've upgraded.
Yeah, Samantha was taken by the Volkswagen Transporter aliens, evidently. These are the upgraded ones.
Okay. But still, it's that external shot, though. It's a case of, it's not really implied to be Barry's fantasy or anything. That's meant to be presented to you as what actually happens to him, though, is that he's been taken by aliens from his house in the middle of a street.
But, the man's been lobotomized. This could just be hallucinations he's having or some kind of seizure.
Well, that's true. I mean, it's whether that external shot is meant to be the truth or that's meant to be how he would perceive it happening from an external viewpoint.
You don't know what his perception is like. Perhaps he's perceiving this from both inside and outside.
True. I mean, we do get the aliens are... It's either Duane Barry... It's the three options, then. It's Duane Barry has genuinely been abducted, and all the aliens are real. There's Duane Barry has been abducted, some of the aliens are real, and there's Duane Barry is completely delusional, and oh god, what's going to happen to Scully?
I think we have to say it's got to either be aliens or the government on the basis of, as you say, the holes in his teeth.
Yeah.
And the implant that drives scanners mad when Scully puts it through them.
I'm still objecting to this, having worked in retail and knowing how a barcode reader would work.
Do you know how a barcode reader would work on an alien artifact that you do not understand?
Yes, because barcodes have to be a certain format for the reader to even read them, otherwise it'll ignore it.
But this is an alien artifact. It's got attributes that you cannot possibly understand and affects machinery in ways you cannot understand.
But it happens to be in the standard barcode format.
I think you can't suspend your disbelief far enough for this series, to be honest.
I do like the weird implication, though, that Duane Barry has followed the implant to Scully, which is an interesting one. Essentially, we'll pour loads of doubt on this in, literally the next episode, but there's certainly the implication.
It's one of the kind of ways that you could think that this would be possible is somehow he can track his implants. I guess it ties into the pilot and the way Bobby could track the other kids.
Yeah, so we'll go that there's something a plausibility thing, but we also have Ascension decides to muddy the water quite a lot. Which I'll go for the big reveal. I think I know why Ascension muddies the water so much. Duane Barry was not meant to be a two-parter. It was conceived and originally written as a single-part episode, so it was going to end presumably with Duane Barry dying.
Or being taken.
But basically the whole kidnap of Scully was written in when their hand was forced with timing. Which explains, I think, a great deal of stuff, because otherwise you've got an episode that is really up in the air with the whole, it sounds very plausible that Duane Barry was taken by aliens. At the same time, everything's cast in doubt because he's possibly a pathological liar, but he has the implants exactly where he said he did, and all this other stuff that makes no sense.
We'll say now as well, for everything you say doesn't make sense. Being the Fox Mulder of this team, I like this episode.
Oh no, I like it.
I think it's a really good episode.
It is.
It's not really action-packed compared to some of the previous conspiracy ones, but it's the tension of the scenes with Mulder and Barry.
Oh, yeah.
The interrogation scenes and the look into Barry's psychology and indeed Mulder's psychology is really, really well handled.
I wasn't disputing that at all.
You know, we've had episodes in the past where my attention's wandered a bit, like in Born Again, for example. But this one held my attention start to finish. It's just riveting.
Yeah. And as you said, it's a shame that Ascension is nowhere near as compelling.
Yeah, sadly, Ascension is not as good an episode as Duane Barry, but Duane Barry, it's your kind of doubt between how genuine Barry is, and even though Mulder believes him wholeheartedly, at least at first.
Yeah.
Versus how dangerous he is. He's in a hostage situation. He shot one of the hostages already. So you've got a ticking time bomb of you've got to get this guy out and get him medical treatment. The danger of what he might do to the other hostages.
I was going to say, Duane Barry does remarkably well with a bullet wound as well in these 2 episodes.
Him himself, yeah.
Him himself, because he gets shot at the end.
By a sniper,
yeah.
too.
And he's only been like half a day in the hospital. But again, with the hospital, this was my whole thing of, it's either the aliens are all real or the aliens are real some of the time and he's imagined them some other times. Because the bit where they appear in the hospital, I don't think is plausibly happening. Because aliens, even at the most unambiguous, tend to sort of grab people when they're on their own, despite the fact there's a suggestion of something weird happening when they're on the stakeout.
We know that the aliens are psychic, though. You know, it could be the aliens manipulating him if they're not even there.
That's true. But that was going to lead me into the next point, is if we believe Duane Barry, they can communicate, they just don't care.
Mm.
So your Mothman analogy starts to fall apart here, because the whole point of the cockroach thing was, you can't explain yourself to the cockroach. They absolutely can explain to humans what's going on, they just don't care.
But they do care to a degree, because Duane Barry mentions how they try to calm the children.
True, despite hurting them, apparently.
They tell the children it's okay and ask the children to be quiet.
Yeah.
But then they hurt them. So
it's
they
really
do indeed try to communicate with people to some degree.
Yeah. But it does invalidate the previous ones where you've said we can't understand what the aliens are doing because it's the cockroach thing. Is no, these ones, they know exactly what they're doing.
But they don't explain themselves in any way.
They don't, but they can at least communicate to you, even if I don't know if it's they can't or they won't explain what's going on.
Because the brief scenes we see of Duane Barry in his teeth drilling chamber, there's no explanation of what's going on. Nobody tries to comfort him in any way. They don't anaesthetize him.
No, bastard creatures, are they?
Mm.
You'd think that a seriously advanced race would actually get anaesthetizing things.
Oh, they've got the power to influence memories. They do a better job of wiping them.
Yeah, more suppression. And not leave these weird hints. I mean, I'm going back to the Fourth Kind again, where they leave in these weird memories of owls. It's a case of, come on, guys, super advanced civilization. The US government can do better memory wipes than you can, apparently.
Oh, they were pretty lame. Remember back to Deep Throat?
Yeah, but for Mulder, though, it worked perfectly. The other pilots, yeah, sure, that kind of screwed them up, but Mulder came out fine. Somehow. We should probably move on a little bit. I do think it's odd, though, that the aliens apparently intervening about halfway through. Because Mulder does confirm there was a time skip, even though that's not very clear in the episode itself. But they also don't disable Duane Barry's gun. I suppose, as you said, this is a different type of aliens to the Vauxhall transporter one.
We still, as far as we can tell, there are several different kinds of aliens in the series, and it's never entirely clear which ones are which.
But as you said, this is the best look we've had at the creatures so far. This is better than Little Green Men.
But they don't look exactly like the ones in Little Green Men either.
No, they're not as skinny.
Tall and spindly. These ones, indeed, I know that for the filming of the episode, they were played by children.
Yeah,
so they are a lot smaller. We could discuss Mulder's speedos, of course. You've skipped right over that.
I was gonna come back to Mulder's speedos. I was putting this up 2 ways before. It's a case of, do I bring up Mulder's speedos just because this was what a lot of the conversation orientated around in the 90s, or do I say no? I mean, we haven't fixated on Scully in underwear in episode 1 or anything, so that feels really unfair. But Mulder's speedos, off you go.
Mulder's speedos are a thing of beauty.
I mean, this was the joke the Simpsons actually sort of picked up on and used.
With his ID card in The Simpsons. Yeah. Krycek doesn't bat an eye as well.
Krycek is keeping very good eye contact all the way through this scene. He does not look down.
It is known for being one of the most particularly popular with women scenes in The X-Files, and it purely comes down to this episode of Krycek coming to alert Mulder when he's having a nice little swim in Very, very small speedos.
It's one of these things where you kind of want to say, Mulder could have been doing anything. Whose idea was the swimming pool and the speedo?
It's pure cheesecake.
It is. I mean, presumably then Mulder's popularity was close enough that they figured they could do this to him.
It's kind of interesting that we only had that one cheesecake shot of Scully in the very first episode, and we've never done it again.
I'm pretty sure, and this is thinking ahead, we never do it again.
You have occasional ones with Scully's sexuality, like Genderbender.
Yeah, but
you've never had Scully in a state of undress like this.
No, or even much provocative stuff. I think even on a date, she was actually really conservatively dressed, wasn't she?
I think Genderbender's the only time you've actually seen Scully in any kind of sensual light, when she was being seduced by Brother Marty or whatever he was called.
No, it wasn't Marty. Marty was the actual one.
Okay.
I can't remember his name.
The friend of Brother Marty.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is why this episode is... It's a shame because it's a good episode.
Lives on in infamy.
But it lives on in infamy for Mulder's speedos.
I think, though, as much as I would agree, I like this episode a lot. I think the weakest link, really, is Mulder getting called in for the hostage negotiation on the back of, you have an interest in alien abductions, come on down. And it feels the weird one where if the X-Files was in operation, that would be fine. It's given they've been forcibly reassigned and he's meant to be doing crap work, it feels odd to give him this kind of bone, doesn't it?
It feels like a dangerous game as well, given Mulder's track record.
Yeah.
Is when they kind of tell him the rules of hostage negotiation is it's kind of, he's supposed to be befriending Duane Barry, but Mulder goes straight into Stockholm Syndrome through this.
Yeah. Feeding into his psychosis.
It's a case of you're supposed to be telling Barry what you want him to hear just to keep him on the phone while they get people into position, essentially. But Mulder just goes off the rails and off script so quickly, which anybody kind of reviewing Mulder's track record should have foreseen this as a possibility.
Yeah, and it feels... and I understand, again, it's that whole things were rushed because of Gillian Anderson's pregnancy, but it's that cut over from Sleepless to Duane Barry feels a bit too abrupt with the whole... He was technically still doing his regular stuff in Sleepless, and now he's been handed an alien abduction case. And Krycek is just his partner now, apparently.
It's also, as you said previously in Sleepless, though, we've really, really sped up Krycek's plot. It's quite apparent that Krycek should have been the friend for a while longer. Yeah, we need more of them working together before we pull essentially what Ascension will pull with him. Even as of Duane Barry, Krycek's getting a bit tired of his appointment. It's Ascension where it speeds up very quickly. Yeah, although we'll try and cut down on Ascension talk for now, though it is difficult with how these two episodes are structured, really. Despite the fact not intended to be structured like that at all. I do have a note here as well, I just can't help but say, but when we get the flashbacks to the abductions or alleged abductions, it's like, aliens are really fond of strobe lights. I think it actually reminds me of, do you remember the Tripod series? Yes. John Christopher, I think it was. Yes. Yeah. At some point, when he wrote the original trilogy, it's like post-apocalyptic future when the aliens have control of the Earth and everything. There was a prequel written out, though, called The Day the Tripods Came, which is about the first contacts with the tripods and how they eventually take over the Earth and everything. Yeah. And one of the points they make, though, when they first encounter it, is they, I think it's like the US military or the UK government, basically herd cattle towards it to see what would happen. And the tripod just switches on a simple beam light, a sort of spotlight, to sort of see what the creatures are. And the point that was made in that was how low tech these aliens seem. That they've just got a beam of light. They've got no infrared, no X-ray, nothing weird and unfathomable. And it's hard not to say that the aliens in the X-Files often feel like that, because they're really fond of their spotlights. They're huge beams of light, which might double as a cone of silence, but... I was thinking the terms of this, if we're going to read into this as it's just Duane Barry's psychosis, is Duane Barry's injury, which was, I think, a gunshot wound, has, much like the Phineas Gage case, it's lobotomized him. Yeah. So he's likely to have seizures. That's very true. So the association between flashing lights, seizures, and weird hallucinations they're all mental effects. He could be seeing these flashing lights and things like that. Yeah. I also kind of like, as a premise, I love the episode with the whole alien abductee doesn't want to be taken again, is going to trade someone in, can't remember where to go, and so goes to a travel agency to try and figure this out. But they will tell him. Although I think that's something in Ascension again. I don't know if they actually say that in
Duane Barry because he's trying to find...
He says it in Duane Barry as well.
Duane Barry, okay.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of, I can't figure out where to go, so I'm going to a travel agency.
It's much like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, though, where they're having the vision of the mountain before they go to it.
That's true. Although this one, presumably, again, is an obvious inspiration on it, but not as specific as that, isn't it? There's no mashed potatoes here. I don't even know the shape of Scully Mountain to even sort of try to make that a mashed potato.
But he is repeating the kind of catchphrases that will eventually, in Ascension, lead him to the mountain. He's got that much of an idea.
He remembers the advert, I think. Is basically
yeah, the sort of cryptic things he says in this episode, it becomes obvious why he's saying it in the next one.
Yeah. We have got an interesting bit of alien lore in this episode, which I don't think we've said before, well, they refer to it as a kind of telepathy, but they don't want to call it telepathy, so it's called mind scan, apparently, is how the aliens communicate with you, which apparently is common across multiple abductees. Which I've got nothing else to go with that. It's just that that's a new bit of terminology for us, I think.
Be interesting how much we see of mind scan going forward.
Yeah. I think one thing that the X-Files has never really tangled with, which is, I think a lot of people do when people criticize alien abduction stories, is aliens have come a very long way to do some very strange things. Like dentistry. I know the cockroach thing.
It's just going to make me repeat it every episode.
Oh, I know, but it's still a case of, what are they getting out of this, really?
You don't know. You're not in a position to know.
To be fair, though, I don't think they know what they're getting out of it. I think they've got orders from on high. It's like, go there, get these people.
It's, if he's telling the truth, the weird positioning of Duane Barry's implants as well.
Yeah, they're oddly placed, aren't they?
I can't remember where they all are, but one's certainly in his belly button.
Gums and nasal cavity. So nasal cavity is at least consistency. Gums is a weird one.
Gums is new, but that's presumably connected to the drilling of his teeth.
Yeah, though not sure why they're different.
You do see the scar on his stomach as well, but again, as I think Scully notes, it could be anything.
It could be shrapnel. Because he was in Iraq, I think, they say.
So it could easily be a shrapnel scar or something else from the time when he was shot in the head that we don't really learn much about in the episode. It's oddly classified.
Yeah.
Incident.
For something so pivotal to Scully's dismissal of the entire situation, they don't get into it at all.
Well, I wondered if it was a bit of a cover-up, because they mention in passing that he was shot with his own gun, but they don't have any other details about it. Makes it sound a bit cover-uppy.
Yeah, I mean, you could make the connection to Fallen Angel, with it being Max has his weird fall where he gets epilepsy because of it and doesn't realise he's been abducted by aliens. So they could be trying to make that, because he was also found alone in the woods or something, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Which then feeds very much into abduction stories like that. But yeah, the pathological liar thing doesn't seem to have much historical evidence for it.
Well, in the episode, although Scully does claim it's the same injury sustained by Phineas Gage, which it clearly wasn't, she mentions that it destroyed the moral centre of his brain, which is where we're getting our he's become a pathological liar aspect from, if he doesn't actually know right from wrong.
I would say, the other thing is, if Duane Barry is telling the truth about in this episode that the government is cooperating with the aliens, which is contrary to Deep Throat, but and contrary to EPE, but not necessarily because we've got different types of aliens wandering around. Apparently, the different types of aliens don't talk to each other, and the Vauxhall transporter ones were trying to do first contact principles in Little Green Men, but the government knew who they were in the 80s, depending on which race we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, admittedly, it's a case of, I like the fact that aliens are trying to do first contact with us. It's like, can you do first contact with each other? Like, I think I'm going to give Futurama a bit, where it's a case of, hunting humans out of season.
Yeah.
And so you're meant to negotiate, you leave the humans alone this time of year, and if one of you talks to you, all of you can talk to them.
In terms of character growth in this episode, I did like how it showed the progression of Mulder's belief. Because at the start of our interrogation, particularly when he gets in the room with Duane Barry and is dealing with him face to face, Mulder is so keen to believe everything he says.
Yes.
And indeed does question him, and it's not until both he gets the recount from Scully explaining about Duane Barry's head trauma, and also the things Duane Barry says begin to contradict themselves, that Mulder does his, can you look me in the eye and tell me you're telling me the truth, and Duane Barry cannot. Yeah,
I mean, you could even make the argument that Mulder's leading him along with how he's actually phrasing when he talks to Duane Barry.
I do think Mulder is a terrible psychologist for somebody who is a psychologist.
A first-class psychologist as well, didn't he? Sort of graduate top of his class.
Top of his class, yep.
In Cambridge, no less. He went to the local poli-sci and got a degree.
Mm. But it's the moment where Mulder tells Duane Barry to go and check the door, which puts him in line of sight of the sniper, is the point where Mulder's clearly given up on him as well. It's Mulder's exhausted, so Mulder's finally realised that actually, no, what this guy's saying is not genuine.
Well, I think you can hark back to Born Again there, where it's when they've failed to give him what he wants, he has no need of them anymore.
I wouldn't go as far as no need. It's that Mulder, it's the dashing of his hopes, as Mulder thought he'd found something genuine, and realised this guy is a liar.
Or at least heavily confused, and what happened to him is not as clear-cut as he wants it to be.
Which is the point where Mulder now has to get the hostages out of there. He's got no further use questioning this guy. He's in a dangerous situation, and so Mulder toes the line at last.
Yeah. Though it's interesting that one of the hostages says she believes him as she's leaving. I think it was Kimberly, wasn't it?
Yes.
Your namesake.
My namesake, of course.
Of course.
But then you've got your concept, the often disproven concept of Stockholm Syndrome as well, where in a stressful situation you start to empathise with your kidnapper.
There is a question as well. So Duane Barry wakes up in hospital, thinks aliens have come for him again, and panics.
Mm.
There's a succession of really inept guards in this episode. So, like, the guard in the hospital let himself get stabbed by a pen and gets his gun taken. The police guard they've left on his room manages to get clobbered by a fire extinguisher when he's not looking.
To be fair, he looked pretty unconscious.
He did, but then it makes me think of things like Happy Death Day, where we also have the inept guard who got killed.
It's just a bit of a movie stereotype, isn't it, though? Because if you have the really effectual guards on the door, the plot's not going to get going.
Well, there is that, yeah. It's just sometimes they seem so inept. There's not anything clever about these escapes or anything, is there? Or just, the aliens intervening and teleporting him away or something.
He just disappears from a locked room.
Exactly. Let's do Tombs again. So we have weird revelations about the implant that they would extract out of Duane Barry that has barcode-like filing. That's why the aliens have decided to use, or are they aliens?
That they get the ballistics expert to look at, so they're clearly not just ballistic markings on there.
Yeah, and it's all the whole. It could have. It's. I suppose it would come. I can take this one more of a whole. We don't understand the aliens of a case of why it's not a uniform shape or anything. It's like a jagged bit of metal, which I could see actually being cover for what they're doing, because it's a case of how often you're going to look at that through a microscope.
I guess it's twofold of. It looks like shrapnel to our untrained eye because it's a jagged bit of metal, but you don't know that that's not what their technology looks like either.
Yes, or it's a deliberate cover.
Mm.
They've deliberately made it look like this. It's like, guys, yes, you've actually got hold of the thing. Like the Extraterrestrials Guide to the X-Files, which you've read a bit of.
Yeah.
I know, it's very silliness.
Yeah, it's terribly silly. I see why you like it so much.
I still think painting slogans on the outside of the ships would do wonders for discrediting all witnesses. It's amazing they haven't tried this for real. Everything else is a bit more elaborate for creatures that apparently don't have, sense of humour, and based on gender bending still, have no concept of anthropology and no interest in it either.
I get the impression in X-Files they're largely interested in human in a biological sense.
Yeah.
It's not... They have no interest in human culture. Again, it's like you researching cockroach culture, I suppose, on this basis, but...
I think the slight difference there, though, is that we're pretty certain cockroaches don't really have a culture.
Have you looked at them closely, or are you making that assumption?
I'm making that assumption. But you'd think, I hope the aliens would be able to sort of see, look, they've built all these structures and they do weird things and have rituals that make no sense. Clearly there's a...
Just like cockroaches.
Do cockroaches have rituals that don't make sense?
Have you looked at them that closely?
I'm going to go look at research and I'm going to find, cockroaches don't have a society. Do you have anything else for this episode? First of two parts.
No, not really. Our episode ends, of course, with Scully being attacked in her own home for, I think this is the third or fourth time now that villains have got access to Scully's house.
Well, it's the second time she's been attacked, but the third time someone's broken in.
Yep.
Oh, good.
Because I think that the FBI just hand out Scully's address to people now.
Oh, well, there's a theory about who might have given her address if it wasn't the implant.
True.
We're getting into muddy water again. Okay, but so our second episode, picking right up, is Ascension. Directed by Michael Lang and written by Paul Brown, with apparently very little input from Chris Carter, which might explain a few things. First broadcast on the 21st October 1994. The only guest star of note, given everyone else has been a series regular to date, is Peter LaCroix as Dwight, who is the cable car operator, who we previously saw as Ranheim in EBE, who was the truck driver.
Oh, that's where we saw him before.
And will come in again in Unrequited in Season 4 as Nathaniel Teager.
Ascension opens as Mulder receives the voicemail that we saw Scully leaving for him at the end of Duane Barry, which features the obvious sounds of a violent scuffle and Scully crying out for help. Mulder heads to her apartment and finds it an active crime scene with signs that Scully was taken away very violently. While there, he meets Scully's mom, who arrived following a dream she had about Scully in which Scully was taken. The following morning, Mulder meets with Skinner, Krycek, and a few others, but Skinner tells Mulder that he doesn't want him involved in the case because he's too close to Scully. He asks Krycek to just take him home. Meanwhile, we cut to Duane Barry. He's driving down an area called the Blue Ridge Parkway. He's pulled over by a policeman who discovers that Scully is locked in the trunk of the car. However, Duane Barry kills him before he can act on this. The police officer's dashcam does catch a clear image of Scully inside the boot. Mulder reviews this video, and from this he figures out that Duane Barry is heading to a ski resort called Skyland Mountain. He puts this together with the things Barry was saying about a mountain in Duane Barry, which included the repeated phrase, "ascend to the stars," which is the advert tagline for Skyland Mountain. Through this, Mulder, of course, figures out that Duane Barry is continuing with the plan he brought up previously, that if he had someone else to be abducted in his place, the aliens would just let him go. Mulder and Krycek head to Skyland Mountain to try and see Duane Barry off. Mulder boards the resort's cable car. He hopes that he'll meet... Mulder boards the resort's cable car. He hopes he'll reach the top of the mountain before Barry can. But unfortunately, Krycek sabotages this. He kills the operator and then just turns the machine off to try and delay Mulder. It works for all of about 10 seconds. When Mulder gets to the top of the mountain, he finds Barry's car and the searchlight of a helicopter passes over him while he's searching the area. Inside the car, he finds no trace of Scully other than her crucifix necklace. He soon after manages to find Barry, who is celebrating in the middle of a clearing, shouting that she was taken by them. Duane Barry is very quickly apprehended by Mulder after this, and he is interrogated by the FBI, including Mulder. During Mulder's interrogation of him, Mulder gets very, very angry and chokes Duane Barry. This does cause very obvious injuries and distress to Barry. Mulder leaves the room, and when he returns he finds Krycek talking to him. Reportedly, Krycek couldn't get any further information out of him. Skinner also arrives moments later, at which point Duane Barry suddenly goes into convulsion and dies. Later, Mulder tries to get autopsy reports from the doctor performing the autopsy, who is obviously not Scully for the first time ever. It turns out to be a military pathologist. They apparently did not have any FBI ones on hand, and Mulder from this believes that the autopsy reports have been tampered. The autopsy shows that Duane Barry died of complications due to the choking. Mulder notices the fact that they didn't seem to publish the blood results, and Mulder believes that he might have actually been poisoned. In the meantime, we see Krycek meeting with the cigarette-smoking man, who he's evidently working for. Krycek suggests that they kill Mulder, however, the smoking man is against this. He wants Mulder alive because otherwise they would risk turning one man's religion into a crusade. Both Mulder and Krycek, however, are ordered to take a polygraph test about Duane Barry's death. Mulder also attempts to visit Senator Matheson, who we previously saw in Little Green Men. However, he's seen off by Mr. X, who says that there is no point in him doing so. There's nothing more that he can glean from this. When returning after this meeting, Mulder finds spent cigarettes in the car. He realises that as neither him or Krycek smoke, it must be that Krycek has been involved with the cigarette-smoking man in some way. Realising that therefore Krycek very clearly had something to do with Scully's abduction, he submits a report to Skinner, accusing him of impeding the investigation and being the one who killed Duane Barry. Skinner immediately summons Krycek into his office, taking Mulder seriously, but only then learns that Krycek has not been seen that day. He appears to have entirely vanished from the FBI. Due to this, Skinner announces to Mulder that he is officially reopening the X-Files. In the final scenes of the episode, Mulder meets with Scully's mother, Margaret, in the park and tries to give Scully's necklace to her. Scully's mom, however, returns the necklace to Mulder and tells her that she has to give it to Scully when he finds her. She also mentions that she had the dream again in which she lost her daughter. Mulder takes this as some kind of sign that Scully is actually alive and tells Scully's mom that she should only be worried if she ever stops having the dream. The episode comes to a close as Mulder returns to Skyland Mountain, to the place where Scully was abducted. He seems quite lost without her and just stands there looking up at the stars.
Thank you. I suppose we need to get into it straight away of, is it a helicopter? Is it a ship that we see?
According to my stringent research, it was a helicopter.
Fair. However, I'm going to say, I suspect on a stipulation you didn't say, how would you answer this question as if you hadn't seen the rest of the series? Because the rest of the series is going to make that answer a lot more complicated, isn't it?
I'm still sticking to mine and Twitter's belief, which is, I apologise, my stringent research was, of course, asking you guys on Twitter, and almost unanimously, you agree with me it's a helicopter.
Okay. Script says otherwise, though, doesn't it?
The script just calls it a light.
It does, but it especially does not specify
Look at it in the episode, it's quite blatantly a helicopter.
I know.
You can see its tail.
I know, but I was thinking that's probably how they did the effect, and they actually probably weren't expecting HD versions of the X-Files to come out so you could actually see the tail. I still think it moves away too fast when it sort of flies away.
It's a helicopter.
They're not that fast.
It's a helicopter.
I think at this point it's meant to be ambiguous at best.
And as our final tagline of the episode does say, deny everything, it's the government. The government have taken Scully.
Admittedly, there's one shot which kind of which just casts doubt on the alien part, which is a very conventional light being sort of moved into place. But that's in Mulder's vision, so it's whether you can trust that or not.
It's a helicopter.
I was going to say, surely Duane Barry would say the difference, but if some men in black came out of a helicopter and said, we're taking Scully in place of you, you'll be fine now. He's going to go with that as well, since he believes the men in black were in the room of his abduction. And this is the ambiguity of the X-Files kicking in to make sure that you can't be sure of anything. Least of all, who took Scully away.
Except for that helicopter.
The other thing I'm going to start with, it just feels so cheesy, and it's kind of the whole, I think, a hallmark of how they've had to rush this, is Skinner reopening the X-Files, which apparently he can do on a whim. What, Skinner, you've been able to do this the entire time. No one's ordered you to do this. You say, I'm reopening the X-Files. That's what they fear the most. Because, yeah, that report on the guy who could squeeze into crawl spaces is really given the alien abductor people sleepless nights.
I think that one about the human flute worm hybrid in
That's
particular.
not an X-File, though.
Oh no, that one wasn't even an X-File.
No, series one stuff. So what's the?
I can have the one about gender flipping Amish people, though.
You can, and you can have those parasites that we nuked in the Arctic Circle.
Or the deadly bees.
Or the deadly bees, yeah. They also vaporize those. Actually, no, I think what really, really freaks out the conspiracy is Charlie Morris.
Which one's Charlie Morris?
Born Again.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He does have
He does have telekinetic powers, I suppose. What's the worst one we could say is going to creep out the government?
Salamander Hand's just become an annoyance for them because they've lost the secret to eternal youth from him.
Yes, that's not really cute of them sleepless nights. Oh, Lazarus. Okay, Lazarus. Lazarus has to be the one they fear the most. God, we can't have people finding out about that guy who reincarnated into someone else's body and then died of diabetes. But yeah, I think it's the whole they've had to speed something up, so it's more than doesn't even blink when it says Skinner saying, I'll reopen the X-Files. It's a case of, you've been able to do this the entire time?
Apparently they banded around other ways that they could get around Scully's pregnancy, which included her giving birth to an alien baby and things like that.
Yeah, I think it's one of those whole, it's a good job they didn't, because it's going to go very
I'll
trashy
take
very
the
fast.
speeding this up over that.
Yeah.
We're getting into strange and the cursed breast implants territory.
Oh my, yes.
Just you guys wait.
Yeah, so the X-Files are reopened, so Mulder has half one, I suppose, by the end of the episode.
He's lost his buddy.
He's lost his buddy.
And even Krycek is his proto-buddy.
Yeah, he's lost his second sidekick. He's not doing well. Okay, we should probably move further back to the start. Because we actually have a significant moment, which I don't think actually is going to pay off anyway, but it's kind of nice, is Mulder meets Margaret.
Yeah, it's probably not the best time to meet Mrs. Scully when her daughter's just been abducted.
But it's all one of those whole, you don't realise, case of, yeah, this is the first time the two of them have actually had a chance to interact, so that's kind of nice.
It also kind of shows the ongoing Scully family psychic powers because in Beyond the Sea, Scully saw her father's ghost, and now Mrs. Scully's having prophetic visions.
Yeah, and didn't want to call her daughter for fear of freaking out.
Mm.
I mean, Mulder, have you not considered opening an X-file on the entire Scully family? Because they sound kind of fascinating, really. Okay, so to get into a bit of a whole, more of an overarching thing, there's a meeting where Skinner, Krycek, and Mulder meeting with other FBI guys to discuss Duane Barry's abduction of Scully. We still got that lingering problem of Cigarette Smoking Man will sit in these meetings and just smoke heavily, and no one will say anything. It's a case of, you going to come join the meeting at the table? No, he's going to sit over there.
I'm going to assume that if you're at Skinner's rank, you at least have an idea of his importance. Because Skinner must vaguely know who he is.
But it's still one of those things of, you think people come into the meetings will sort of just sort of keep looking around at this other guy. It's a case of, are you going to introduce us, sir? I mean, he's right there. What clearance does he have? He didn't have a badge.
Maybe it's a difference in kind of government officers, but I think, where I work, when you came into a room, you kind of expect to be introduced to anyone you didn't know in there.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, have you met Steve before?
He just smokes and sits over there. Mm. But I thought it was interesting that when they're talking about it, I think when Mulder even mentions the implant, Krycek and Cigarette Smoker actually do exchange a look. So it's a case of, and there's some doubt on Krycek's part, which is really odd when you connect to Sleepless, with him saying, I've recommended we get rid of Scully. And he seems so freaked out in this episode that they've actually gone and done it this way.
Mm.
I'm wondering, was he expecting just an assassination or something, and he did not expect this kind of show of power, this apparent show of power.
Krycek does appear to be a crowbar rather than a scalpel,
yeah.
Given how you see him dispatch the lift operator, and the fact that he just wants to assassinate Mulder as well.
He's very keen on assassinating
We don't really know what Krycek's background is, but he seems to be some kind of assassin.
Yeah. It's so interesting as well, though, that he keeps updating, presumably, CSM all the time on his what they're up to. But I thought the timing of the shot when he and Krycek head off the Skyline Mountains is kind of interesting. Because Krycek rings up Cigarette Smoker Man on the phone, hangs up, gets in the car with Mulder, and they drive off. And they drive past Cigarette Smoker Man in that other car, and he's lowering a phone. So the implication is meant to be, that's after Krycek's call. But you could also read it as, he's phoned up the aliens, or the government agency, and said, okay, Scully's going here. Get ready to abduct. The other part, though, is at the end of the episode, Cigarette Smoker Man makes a whole point of, this is how they dealt with Scully. And Krycek is obviously a bit weirded out by that. But it's still, if you think of that chain of thought, so from Sleepless with the whole, we've got to do something about Scully. And it's really convoluted because it basically is that then they had to influence the hostage negotiation people to bring in Mulder to do the hostage negotiation because he would call Scully and then she would come down and Mulder would give her the implant or Krycek would give Duane Barry her address, that Duane Barry would go there, take her, go up to Skyline Mountain so they could then stage an abduction incident to take the Scully to do something.
I personally think that, given the timing of the episode, it's more believable that Duane Barry managed to track her by supernatural means than Krycek somehow got an address to her.
Exactly. But then that's still the question of, if this... It's one of these whole... Was this the plan, or was this a happy accident that gave them the right circumstances to dispense with Scully?
Mm.
And Cigarette Smoker Man is definitely giving you the impression that, I'm in complete control of the situation. Or is he a complete chance in this case of, aha, excellent, right, now just let them, make sure they don't get stopped, let him get to the site, we can stage the abduction, and she's gone.
This first half of the episode I thought was the better half, though.
Absolutely.
It's very exciting. You get a bit of stunt work with Mulder climbing around on top of a cable car and things like that.
And then just kind of, as soon as he gets to Duane Barry, it all starts unravelling.
It's as soon as you have the bit with Duane Barry cheering, yes, yes, I've done it, I'm free, and all the rest of it. And after that, it's downhill.
Yeah. Well, I like how he freaks out when the elevator comes over the hill. So, the helicopter comes over the hill and there's just the blinding white light.
And he thinks they've come back for him.
Yeah, I like the panic of the case of, I didn't actually manage to do my deal.
You then get the random crazy happenstance of Duane Barry's assassination too, where Krycek manages to make it look like it's Mulder's fault.
Yeah, and presumably his theory about ingestion of poison must be correct.
I'm going to presume that Mulder's theory is correct and Krycek has poisoned the guy, because that's our look of the fact we don't have Scully to do the autopsies at this time, so therefore they can cover up what's found very easily.
Yeah. I did think as well, watching it again, it's Krycek's the rescinding of Krycek's role in the FBI feels really awkward in this episode. Because basically Krycek's saying, how long do I have to keep on doing this, or something like that, and CSM says, as long as you have to.
Which turns out to be 15 minutes.
Yeah, but it's one of those whole, is it surveillance or is it poor writing that basically Mulder doesn't talk to anyone after he finds the cigarette butts, goes straight to Skinner with them and his report accusing Krycek of it. They then find out Krycek hasn't come into work that morning and his home numbers were disconnected. Mulder also proves that the brand of cigarettes is exactly the same as the one that's overflowing his ashtray. And it's kind of the prompt for Skinner to say, oh, that guy, and possibly open up a bit about this, but he doesn't. What point did they figure out that Krycek was compromised and had to get him out?
I like to play devil's advocate just because I can, but I can't in this instance.
What is going on?
There just is no time frame. It is like we've kind of... maybe we wanted to keep that scene with the Cancer Man and Krycek because it had that really good line about making one man's...
religion into a crusade.
Yeah, one man's religion into a crusade is a really good line and we didn't want to get rid of it.
Yeah, I think they use it a few too many times though, because I think that keeps being brought up again, doesn't it? It's the whole, it would be really easy if we just shot Mulder right now. Oh, we can't do that. Really? I mean, who's going to start a crusade over... I need another
well, especially not now that his partner's been abducted by aliens.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a warning that of, work with Mulder, get abducted by aliens. This could be you. Actually, that is one thing I had wrong on the X-Files in Duane Barry, actually, for a long time, was there's a line where Mulder says something to Duane Barry and he says, "You're careful what you say to that, they'll have your ass." For years, I'd sort of interpret that as him sort of saying, be careful or the aliens will take you. And Mulder saying, I don't care.
I think by they, he means the government.
He does, I would say, but for 8 years, I thought it was him talking about the aliens, and then going to say, that's not how Little Green Man had it, but no, yeah, it's, yeah, he's talking about the government, they'll fire him or something, but he doesn't care as long as he gets his truth. I think the other interesting part of this is Mulder's kind of loss of faith in this episode. Because he backslides on quite a lot of stuff, and I think it's a lingering after effect of the pathological liar stuff for Duane Barry. Because he voices this idea that someone could have given Duane Barry Scully's address.
Yeah.
And he doesn't actually provide a good candidate for who could have done that. I mean, he kind of implies it's Krycek.
We've got to assume that it would have to be Krycek.
It's the only person who makes sense in this context to give it to Duane Barry, but it's still one of these interesting one of, you think Duane Barry might have said something at some point, especially after he was arrested. It's like, oh yeah, your partner there, he gave me Scully's address. So I think we can discount that one.
Not necessarily, because Duane Barry is not in a good frame of mind anyway.
He's not.
To have a coherent thought when he's evidently got problems with his perception and memory.
Yeah, but it's interesting in this meeting, as much as Mulder's been mocked as he normally is, he's actually willing to give a very mundane, slightly more plausible explanation of how Duane Barry found Scully's apartment. Only slightly more plausible, because we've still got a weird chain of events going on there.
Oh, sorry. It's flagging. Sleep deprivation caused Chernobyl, don't forget.
Kind of true, kind of not true. It's a good line, though, admittedly. And Mulder, yeah, you should probably, though you shouldn't let Krycek drive, because if Krycek drives, you're going to, as you said, drive off to the Rocky Mountains or something.
Yeah, that was... Well, Mulder always kind of insists on driving anyway, which is fortuitous for him, because I think the second he closed his eyes, Krycek would say, whoops, I must have taken a wrong turn. Oh no, we're in Florida.
Yeah. Damn it, Krycek. I mean,
whap whap.
I suppose as well for Duane Barry not being exactly coherent or trustworthy, he glimpses the men in black outside the window when Mulder's talking to him, and then they walk away before Mulder turns around. So Mulder doesn't see.
But Krycek, we assume, has been talking to them, because he asked Krycek if anyone was out there, and Krycek denies it. And
that comes down to that whole... The X-Files can get frustrated in this one of the ambiguity of Krycek is going to say the same thing whether they're there or not.
Yeah.
You can't actually trust that he would have actually said there was anyone out there. Although the little group of mibs are just these 3 people in suits who just turn up places. Hey, Steve, want to see the abduction? Oh, this is a good one.
It's very in keeping with abduction stories, though, is to have the government officials that kind of follow them.
Yeah, although the Men in Black usually sort of split into 2 categories. You either get how Deep Throat had it with the genuine, these are government employees, and the weird, shall we say, trickster creatures possibly. The ones who actually are around to discredit you.
The ones that show up at your house after you've reported an abduction. It's a common feature, and you hear about them a lot if you read stories from abductions, that days after they spoke to the paper about it, these weird men in suits appeared at their houses.
Usually threatening. Yeah.
Usually threatening them, or trying to make them think that what they said was crazy.
Yeah.
Which is in keeping with Duane Barry saying he's seeing government officials around.
So we can't discount there were people around there, and there were these people in the room. They might not necessarily actually been the government.
I guess if Duane Barry's encountered these people before, they don't even necessarily need to see something. They'll get a reaction if he just sees them from a distance.
Yeah. I do wonder as well, going back to the cigarette smoking man and Krycek, are we meant to believe that Krycek might be dead at this point? I mean, unfortunately, we know he is because he's listed in a lot of episodes.
I don't think there's anything to suggest Krycek is dead. I think the episode would have made more of it if you were supposed to think that.
True, but it's not as if they've not disappeared other people.
No, I view it more as kind of...
his role's done and he's been moved on to whatever he's doing next.
It could be the thing if we didn't make so blooming obvious that Krycek was a trailer, where this would be your first sign that he was.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Nobody called Krycek ever worked here sort of logic.
I think the original suggestion back in Sleepless would have been more effective if Krycek hadn't been in that scene with Skinner.
Yeah, it was unfortunate that discredited that in this episode, because in Sleepless there was no indication that Skinner knew about Krycek or anything like that. So he could have been the sleeper agent.
And that would have been a great one of case of, okay, we'll need to find out about this agent Krycek. There's no one on the payroll called that. I mean, I think you possibly are doing Mulder no favours at that point, because that's getting into the real, is anything trustworthy said by anyone at any point in this series?
Which leads into X's involvement in this episode, as he's a lot less helpful than Deep Throat, less sympathetic.
He's also very ambiguous with his phrasing, because I think he says that she's beyond my power, which doesn't necessarily mean orbit, or...
It means that she's at a higher echelon that he can't get to.
Yeah, if we're going to blame the government solely for this.
We don't know. We know Deep Throat was very high up in whatever organisation this is. We don't know where X is.
No, not at all. We haven't seen him commanding legions of soldiers yet. Is it kind of indicative that Mulder is going to dispense with Krycek when he calls him Alex? Which is a weird one.
Yeah, he stops using his surname at one point.
Yeah, is that wrong? Is that right? He doesn't do that with anyone else. And also, cigarette smoking man, for a guy who's all-powerful and is keeping so many secrets, just casually uses Krycek's ashtray to sort of stub out his cigarettes. It's fine.
I think you have Krycek's sudden disappearance as evidence enough for Skinner as well that Krycek is actually the murderer.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because I'm pretty sure there are absolutely nothing about Mulder's conduct will be called into question after this episode. It's solely on the Scully's abduction is the only thing that will go forward.
I imagine that even if Mulder takes his polygraph test, it'll show he's not lying, from which you take the fact that Krycek isn't here to take the test and has vanished altogether, that he is the guilty party.
He can't defend himself. Although Mulder does actually suggest to Skinner that Scully could be dead, which is, again, another backslide on his whole faith.
I think by this point Mulder's faith will be shattered, though, on the basis of, if Mulder had not entertained Duane Barry, would Scully have ever been taken?
An excellent question. I think we can answer, yes, it would have, but we don't know how.
But from Mulder's perspective.
Yeah, Mulder's perspective, yeah. I do like this, like that nice bit about Margaret giving him the crucifix back at the end, though. Sort of saying, give it to her when you find her.
It's showing again, though, that Mulder doesn't really get faith. He makes a similar comment at the end as he can't understand why Scully wore a crucifix when she's a scientist. Because Mulder, for all his kind of belief in weird things, doesn't understand faith in the Christian sense.
No, and the fact there are a lot of Christian scientists in the world, and people can actually square both of them off with each other.
Yeah. But again, this is where Mrs. Scully as a religious person's hope is coming from.
Yeah.
It's more hope in providence and the faith that some higher power will keep her daughter safe.
Yeah. Have you got anything else for this episode?
No, I do not.
Do you want to do a mega Kim's Conspiracy Corner? Because I think this is a lot.
Oh, geez. Right, let's see what I can do with the Conspiracy Corner.
So, it's time for Kim's Conspiracy Corner.
Okay, through Duane Barry and Ascension, we have potentially learned either a lot or very little, depending on how accurate you believe Duane Barry's account of alien abductions to be. We know that they can take people repeatedly, which is a bit different to some of the things we've seen previously, where we know previously, like with Samantha, the aliens don't always bring people back. But for the sake of Duane Barry's account, the aliens usually come in the night. They spirit people away in a bright light, which goes unnoticed by people around them. They then take people back to their presumable spaceships to conduct tests on them, which are done in these large, airy, dark chambers using machinery that we can't really comprehend. We also learn that the aliens have some level of telepathy and can indeed communicate with humans, though tend not to. Beyond things like telling children that they have abducted, because the abductees apparently can see each other during these experiences, and they will tell children things like to be quiet and not to be afraid before conducting horrible tests on them. These tests involve putting implants in, as we've seen before, but the implants can legitimately be anywhere in the body. With Duane, we see that they drill his teeth with lasers to put implants in his gums and also place them in his belly button. The implants themselves we do see within the episode as kind of shards of what to the untrained eye look like shrapnel. However, when scanned by machinery such as the barcode reader that Scully finds in the grocery store, it does send the machinery into absolute haywire, making us wonder what the nature of these barcodes are and how they're supposed to be read. There is also a belief that perhaps the aliens aren't discerning about who they choose. Duane Barry can potentially track other people with implants, though this is unproven within the episode. And also he proves that the aliens, if it is indeed aliens at work here, can be bribed with other people, so he can just give someone in his place and they will leave him alone. On the non-alien side of this, of course, we can read a lot of this as it's nothing to do with aliens, Duane Barry is crazy, and that everything we see within the episode is actually a product of the government, though we do not know to what ends or how they're doing this beyond what we've already seen, such as them already utilising UFO technologies to make high-grade weapons and other things. In the Shadow Conspiracy episode, we see the fact that, once again, they will disappear people if they cause trouble. They can also perform high-grade assassinations within the government and totally cover up elements of it. They have control of things like military pathologists, high-ranking FBI agents, the police, and various other agents that they can use. They are somewhat strategic about the use of these. For example, the fact that they will not assassinate Mulder directly. They just essentially use fear as a weapon. So therefore, they will attack anybody surrounding a dangerous party if they think it will discredit them or get them to not pursue lines of inquiry. In the course of this episode, it works to varying degrees of success. Mulder's spirit is broken. However, the X-Files are reinstated, which can't be something that the Cancer Man has foreseen.
The major takeaway, though, aside from the whole Scully is missing, is that the X-Files have been reopened. Almost on a whim. So they've been closed for a whole 6 episodes there. Doesn't really feel that detrimental.
Yep, that would be the 6th episode, you're right.
Don't know what Mulder's complaining about, really.
He has lost his partner.
He has lost his partner and his
backup partner.
So next week we have 2 extremely disjointed episodes. We have 3 and 1 Wrath.
Yay!
There's one gunman in one of them.
The other one is 3.
Thank you all for listening as always. Our email address, should you want to get hold of us, is thingersagettingstrange42@gmail.com.
If you'd rather speak to us over on social media, we are GetStrange42 on Tumblr and Twitter. We are at GetStrange42 at universedon.com on Mastodon. And if you search for us on Facebook, you can find us as Things Are Getting Strange, an X-Files Rewatch podcast.
Our theme music is Envision by Kevin MacLeod. You can find that on incompetech.com, licensed under the Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. Thank you all for listening, and until next week, remember,
deny everything.